Well, I've come all the way now to the Cottage Inn at Wemden, where I've been joined by our squibbing officer, Clive Kett, and we're here to talk about these, the Bridgwater Squibs. And Clive, you've been our squibbing officer for about 5 years now, and you've inherited quite a legacy, haven't you?
Yes, I mean, squibbing has been taking place for at least 300 years, as far as we know. Documentary evidence takes it back to 1716. The first recorded incident of somebody actually blowing themselves up making the squibs. And making the squibs in those days involved wrapping paper around a mandrel like this, drawing it in, and then the squib case would then go onto a tamping block like that. The tamping blocks are a different size depending on the size of squib. And then the composition, which was made, all homemade in those days, would then be tamped down into the squib using a tamp like that. Gunpowder was certainly commercially available way before Guy Fawkes, before 1605. Certainly the 14th century it was commercially available. So making squibs wasn't a problem in those days. Indeed, hundreds and hundreds were made around the time of the start of the Bridgwater Carnival. Certainly the most sort of famous start, if you like, was on the Cornhill. When we had the bonfire, which sadly is defunct now, became defunct in 1924.
So these squibs would actually be let off around the bonfire at that time?
Traditionally they would have been, yes, hundreds of them, and during the carnival procession, before and after it.
So this really was the start of our carnival as we know it?
We believe so, yes. Certainly the squibbing probably preceded the carnival.
Yeah. And you say 1716, but as far as we know, of course, these squibs could be made way back in the days of Guy Fawkes, and probably let off at that time when the celebration started in the town.
I would think it's most likely, yeah. Sadly, there's no documentary evidence of that.
Now, you say they were all homemade, but obviously professionally made for us these days, thank goodness. But when they were homemade, there must have been one or two accidents.
Yes, there were accidents due to the composition, which was obviously gunpowder, there were iron filings, ground glass and various other things put into the composition, and then mixed in a coffee grinder, would you believe, at home. There was certainly a case of somebody checking out the composition with a candle, believe it or not, and you can guess what that resulted in. There was also a case at the turn of the century, or shortly after the turn of the century, where the police raided a house in Angel Crescent and found about 160 squibs nestled in a cupboard next to a fire to keep them warm.
Quite a dangerous practice, I would imagine.
Very dangerous in those days. However, since the sort of 1990s, we've had to go to commercially available squibs for health and safety reasons. And in fact, the company which supplies us now is the only licensed company in the UK to provide the squibs.
Now, you've given us a description of actually how they're made, but how would they be ignited? I mean, these aren't handheld objects, are they?
Not at all. They're ignited from what we call the river of fire, which are ground wads all the way down through the high street, which are lit, and then the squib is lit from the ground wad on a thing called a cosh.
What, one of these, you mean? This is quite an antique model of a squib cosh, isn't it?
Yes, that was lent to us, or was owned by the late Walt Creedy and is on sort of permanent loan to us. That dates from at least sort of the early 1940s as far as we know.
Now, I've done a bit of squibbing, so I know what you do with it. Do you actually tie the squib on the end there? Yeah,
certainly we wouldn't use a cosh like this today, obviously due to its poor condition. The squib is firmly strapped onto the cosh like that. The fuse is then removed or taken across to one side, and then every squibber simultaneously dips the fuse into the ground wad and then simultaneously takes it up horizontally above their head.
A bit like that?
Just like that.
But I'd be standing up at the time.
You would be. And our squibs now burn for almost exactly a minute. We've got a new celebration squib this year, specially made for us, and I think that's going to be quite something. Sadly, for health and safety reasons, we used to have what was called a bounce. At the end of the squib, as the squib burnt down, there was a piece of blasting powder, rock powder in the bottom, and that went off with a terrific bang, hence the bounce, because the cosh used to go up like that. We don't do that anymore, but we do have a new squib for this year, which will have a slightly different effect, and you'll see it on the video.
Well, I look forward to holding one as well when I do the squibbing in the high street after our parade. But of course, this size squib is quite a miniature compared to some of the ones that we've had in the past, and You've got a few examples.
Yes,
there,
I mean, we go back here, these two. This one, believe it or not, the lady who loaned me this uses it for keeping her knitting needles in and has done since about 1960. This was a typical 1960s squib, not made at home, made professionally for us by Paynes in those days.
And it's even got a price on there, I believe.
It even has got a price on there of 1 shilling, 1960, 1 shilling.
5p, eh?
5p. Now, went through the process of making them. Going back to 1920, when they were homemade, that's the sort of size they were, 2 feet long and 2-inch diameter. And this one is kindly lent by Clive Kett. And this one's rather unique, or very unique, in that it was used by fired by his grandfather and subsequently covered in postage stamps of that time, and then varnished, and it stood the test of time. As I say, that's from the early 1920s.
That really is a massive squib, isn't it? How long do you think that would take to, not from ignition right the way through
to...
a
good few minutes.
Yes.
Good few minutes.
And that must have been quite heavy for somebody to hold it on the squib.
It would be, yes, and indeed there are cases of, because of course these had the banks and all sorts of effects in them, there are quite a number of cases of coshes being broken in those days when it was uncontrolled, unlike it is today.
Yes, you mentioned the simultaneous display that we have in the carnival these days, but of course over the years we've had bigger displays, haven't we, with competitions and the like going on.
Indeed, each individual club used to compete for the best display. It was almost choreographed and timed right down to the sort of last second. But we don't, and they used to go on until 2 o'clock in the morning, that's why it's probably died out.
And there was a cup for it as well, wasn't there?
There was indeed the Winslade Cup. Yes. Last awarded in 1972.
Which is one of the nicest cups we award, I think.
It's a beautiful one, yes.
Solid silver, isn't it?
Yeah, there is now a cup, now the Prior Cup, for the last person, or the person with the last squib to fizzle out, if you like. And certain clubs have certain ways of ensuring theirs is the last one to go out.
We saw this squib here, which cost £1, but the squibs today cost a little bit more than that, don't they?
They're about £5 each now, yes.
Which really makes it prohibitive to run that competition as well, because the clubs would have to buy these squibs themselves, and it takes quite a lot out of their resources to do that. Yeah, it
certainly would do. I mean, £5 each. This year we're hoping to let off, at the moment it's looking like about 180. Which will beat even last year's record. Last year was 165, and that's an all-time record.
And whereabouts does this simultaneous display take place?
It takes place in the High Street, directly after the carnival.
And it must line the High Street from top to bottom then?
We do. We'll go from above the Town Hall this year right the way down. We're hoping we'll probably end up next to this fellow, which is the Squibber.
Well, not actually next to that one,
no.
the bigger version of this.
Yes.
You mentioned this is obviously a scaled-down version of our new statue, the Spirit of Carnival. And we've had these statuettes made especially for us and as souvenirs. And
yes, it was the idea of Roger Brown that we should celebrate the 400 years in a special way. The full-size statue will be outside the former post office on the Cornhill, and is the first statue to be erected since Admiral Blake.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Clive, for talking to me about the squibs today, and we look forward to seeing a simultaneous display when it takes to the street on Friday the 4th of November.
Yes, we're all looking forward to it. Thank you, Chris.